Marcus Thompson's hands trembled slightly as he wiped down the last table in the corner of Romano's Italian bistro. The tremor wasn't from age. At 34, he was still in his prime, but from the constant weight of exhaustion that had become his unwelcome companion. The dinner rush had finally ended, and the restaurant's warm lighting cast long shadows across the red-checkered tablecloths. Most customers had filtered out into the cool October evening, leaving behind only the lingering aroma of garlic bread and the soft murmur of a few remaining diners. Marcus glanced at his watch. 9:47 p.m. His daughter Emma would already be asleep by now, tucked safely in her small bed in their one-bedroom apartment just a few miles away. Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor who watched Emma during his evening shifts, would be dozing in the recliner, the television providing a gentle blue glow in their modest living room. This routine had become Marcus's lifeline over the past 2 years since his wife Sarah's sudden passing from a heart condition that doctors said was undetectable until it was too late. The weight of single parenthood pressed down on his shoulders like the heavy pack he used to carry during his 3 tours in Afghanistan. But unlike those missions, this battle had no clear objective, no extraction point, no end in sight. It was just him against the world, trying to provide for a 7-year-old girl who still asked when mommy was coming home. "Marcus, you can head home after you finish that section," called Tony Romano, the restaurant owner, from behind the bar where he was counting the night's receipts. Tony was a good man, understanding about Marcus's situation, but even his patience had limits when it came to the bottom line. "Thanks, Tony. Just need 5 more minutes," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the practiced steadiness he'd learned in the military. "Never show weakness. Never let them see you break." These were the mantras that had kept him alive overseas and were now keeping him functional stateside. As Marcus folded the damp cleaning cloth, his attention was drawn to a commotion near the restaurant's large front window. A sleek black Tesla had pulled up to the curb, and from it emerged a man in an expensive charcoal suit. Even from across the restaurant, Marcus could tell this wasn't a typical late-night customer. Everything about the man screamed wealth and success, from his confident stride to the way he checked his gold watch as he approached the entrance. The man who entered was David Chen, though Marcus didn't know that yet. What Marcus could see was someone roughly his own age who carried himself with the kind of assurance that came from never having to choose between paying the electric bill or buying groceries. David's dark hair was perfectly styled, and his shoes probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. He was the kind of person Marcus had once been trained to protect, back when his world made sense and he wore a uniform with pride. David chose a table near the window, apparently unbothered by the late hour. He ordered quickly, the salmon, a side of roasted vegetables, and a glass of the house red wine. Marcus noticed how David's fingers moved constantly across his phone screen, the blue light reflecting off his wire-rimmed glasses. Even during his meal, the man seemed incapable of disconnecting from whatever digital world commanded his attention. Marcus was refilling the coffee station when he heard the bell above the door chime again. This time, 5 men entered together, and immediately, every instinct Marcus had developed during his military service began firing warning signals. These weren't customers. Their movements were too coordinated, too purposeful. They spread out slightly as they entered, a formation that Marcus recognized from his tactical training. Their eyes swept the restaurant not like diners looking for a table, but like hunters surveying territory. The leader of the group was a tall man with a shaved head and intricate tattoos crawling up his neck. His companions varied in size and build, but they all shared the same predatory awareness, the same barely contained energy that Marcus had seen in men who were preparing for violence. They wore dark clothing that could conceal weapons, and their body language screamed danger to anyone trained to recognize it. Marcus's breath caught in his throat as memories flooded back, the weight of his rifle in his hands, the adrenaline surge of an ambush, the split-second decisions that meant the difference between coming home and becoming another name on a memorial wall. His hands steadied, the tremor disappearing as his military training kicked in like muscle memory. Tony, busy with paperwork behind the bar, hadn't noticed the shift in atmosphere. The few remaining customers were absorbed in their own conversations or their phones. But Marcus saw everything, how the 5 men positioned themselves to control the exits, how their leader's eyes locked onto David Chen with predatory focus, how one of them casually moved his jacket aside to reveal the handle of a knife. Well, David Chen, the leader called out, his voice carrying across the quiet restaurant like a crack of thunder. Fancy meeting you here. David looked up from his phone, and Marcus watched as the color drained from the CEO's face. Recognition flickered in David's eyes, followed immediately by fear. This wasn't a random encounter. This was personal. Jake, David said, trying to keep his voice steady as he slowly placed his phone on the table. I didn't expect to see you here. Jake, the tattooed leader, laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. I bet you didn't. Thought you could just ruin my life and disappear into your fancy corporate world, didn't you? Marcus moved closer, pretending to wipe down a nearby table while positioning himself within earshot. His mind was already calculating distances, angles, potential weapons, and escape routes. The salt and pepper shakers on each table could be thrown to create distraction. The heavy wine bottles behind the bar could serve as improvised weapons. The kitchen had multiple exits, but also knives that could be used against him if the confrontation moved in that direction. Jake, please, David said, his composure cracking. Can we talk about this somewhere else? These people have nothing to do with our business. Our business? Jake's voice rose, causing the other diners to finally look up from their meals. You mean the business where you destroyed my company? Where you stole my contracts and left my employees without jobs right before Christmas? That business? Marcus pieced together the story as it unfolded. David Chen, apparently a successful CEO, had somehow wronged Jake in a business deal gone bad. The details didn't matter now. What mattered was that 5 dangerous men were surrounding one unarmed target in a confined space with innocent bystanders. Jake's companions began to close in on David's table. One of them, a stocky man with scarred knuckles, cracked his fingers menacingly. Another, thin and wiry with nervous energy, kept glancing toward the kitchen as if planning escape routes of his own. You cost me everything, Jake continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. My business, my house, my marriage. My kids won't even talk to me anymore because Daddy can't afford Christmas presents. David tried to stand, but Jake pushed him back down into his chair with enough force to rattle the wine glass. I tried to do things the legal way, Jake said. Lawyers, courts, appeals. But money always wins, doesn't it, David? Your money bought better lawyers than I could afford. Marcus caught Tony's eye from across the restaurant and gave him a subtle hand signal, a military gesture that meant, call for backup. Tony, confused but trusting, quietly reached for the phone behind the bar. But Marcus knew that police response time in this neighborhood averaged 8 to 12 minutes on a good night. Whatever was going to happen here would be over long before help arrived. So now we do things my way, Jake said, and Marcus saw the glint of metal as Jake pulled a switchblade from his jacket pocket. The blade clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent restaurant. The other diners finally realized what was happening. A woman at a corner table gasped and grabbed her husband's arm. An elderly couple near the door looked toward the exit with obvious fear but seemed too frightened to move. The atmosphere in the restaurant transformed from cozy and welcoming to tense and dangerous in the space of a heartbeat. David's hands were shaking now, his earlier confidence completely gone. Jake, please, we can work something out. I can help you get back on your feet. Alone, maybe, or I could help you find new contracts. Help? Jake laughed bitterly. Like you helped when you undercut my bids? Like you helped when you poached my best clients with promises you knew I couldn't match? Marcus had heard enough. His daughter's face flashed in his mind, Emma, sleeping peacefully, trusting that her daddy would come home safe from work. But there were other children to think about too, Jake's kids, who might lose their father to prison or violence, the innocent customers who had simply wanted a quiet dinner, Even David Chen, who despite his apparent mistakes,